I'm going to switch to the third study, which is, you can see on your schedule, a Smart City Transportation System of Systems Governance Framework. Presenter is Valerie Lee, who came from Singapore on a 25-hour flight, and she's an entrepreneur. She graduated from the National University of Singapore with an engineering degree and an MBA from the University of Adelaide.
Thank you, Rick.
Ready?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Valerie, and thank you for coming to listen to my presentation. Today, my paper title is A Smart Cities Transportation System of Systems Governance Framework, a case study of Singapore. So this paper is written under the guidance of Professor Alex Burrow. So in this presentation overview, I'll be touching on the introduction and major challenges of smart cities, followed by the benefits of having a governance framework and the application of this framework using Singapore as a case study. And you will end with an impact assessment of the system of systems and a conclusion followed by a Q&A session. So smart cities are actually facing a lot of challenges nowadays because of the rapid urbanization and motorization. And because of this, it has triggered a lot of smart cities solutions, which we find it very difficult to adopt because of the complexity of the planning and then operations. So because of this, we think that a concrete system of governance framework will be able to integrate with this existing solution in order to manage the transportation system for smart cities better. So the challenges of the major smart cities are lack of credible transportation option. So because of this, sudden population will lead to low reliability and low efficiency in the transportation network. And centralization of the transportation system is also a problem because it is tough to incorporate all the minor system into one big one. And for example, camera, vehicles, and things like that. So there is difficulty centralizing into one main system. Safety and security is also an issue because there are potential terrorists, and also the aging infrastructure will affect how the transportation network will work. And lastly, the sustainability of the transportation system will be affected because of the limited land space to build new transportation system for long-term planning. So because of this, a strong governance system will be very important and useful in order to address these challenges. So there is a relationship between a good governance framework versus the economy of the whole system itself. Because of these multiplier effects, there is higher employment rate, there will be additional investment, and then reduce business costs directly and also indirectly. So looking at Singapore, for those who have not been to Singapore, this is how it looks like in the night scenery. And we are working towards a smart nation since 2 years ago. And the total land space that we have is actually 724.2 square kilometer. However, you look at the population, it is about 7 million. So you know that it's very crowded and filled with people. So land transportation is actually a very major concern for the country. Yet we are doing pretty well. So we are using this as a case study. You look at this complicated network. This is our mass rapid transit network, which is also known as a train for your company. So there are 5 major types of network going across the whole island itself. So with this, we have also a hub and spoke design together with the bus transportation. So this is how it looks like during our peak hours. This is the MRT station where everybody will take the train to work and then going home. So this is how crowded it is, and it's a real photo. And you talk about driving. This is the traffic flow that we have to drive through every day when it comes to peak hours.
You can't see if they're moving.
And this is what happened because of the hub and spoke design between the train and the bus. When the train breaks down, everybody will choose an alternate option to take bus. And this is what will happen to the bus itself. So having this problem itself, our government has implemented three things. First, the ERP gantry mechanism, which some of you may have already seen it before, if you have heard about it. So the ERP itself is, it looks something like this. And so it will be built across the island, especially on areas where it is very crowded. So as you cross the space itself, it will auto-deduct the amount from your car IU itself. So depending on which road you will take, the purpose of this is the government will prevent you from taking the route. So those route that they prevent itself, they will have a higher cost to it. So you may have to spend like US dollar, maybe $15 each time you go to work. And SoE is another way to limit the land vehicle quota. So the paper itself costs a lot of money, and it is by bid, quarterly bid. So you look at the Volkswagen, for example, in Malaysia it's selling at 45,000. However, because of this SoE implementation, buying a car can be 110,000 for Singapore itself. So this is the paper cost for you to own the car for 10 years. And then we did establish LTA, which is a Land Transport Authorization. This is authority to build, plan, and operate the existing land infrastructure. However, given this system in place for the past 30 years, the traffic congestion issue is still there when the system interacts with other systems itself. So the MRT system will always fail, and it can be failure rate of up to 4 hours. And this is due to the lack of skilled maintenance engineers, and also when there's no proper maintenance schedule. So because of this consistently poor performance by the rail operators, the government decided to buy over the maintenance of the system itself. And because of this, the commuters' dissatisfaction rate is very high, and therefore it resulted in a conflict of the government's initial objective of setting up the LTA. So you look at this, we have classified the Singapore land transportation system as a system of systems. This is a systemic RAM. So you look at how the train, the taxi, and the buses are interconnected. So we consider this as a system of systems because individual system can actually perform on its own independently to commute to transport the commuters from one place to another. However, if they are combined and work together, it will have a greater function of offering a greater flexibility. Another reason is it actually display varying degree of automation, autonomous, belonging, connectivity, diversity, and emergence behavior. So this is the new governance framework that we come up with to manage the next generation smart cities of transportation system. Looking at this, we first look at the SOS, which is the top layer, and followed by the external factors that actually will affect the system of system itself. And at the bottom, we have the governance governing body where we have the LTA, MOF, and PTC together. So there are constraints that will also affect the governing body itself. And from there, the SOS has already been illustrated by the systemic RAM just now. And there will be a feedback loop that we will do to do survey collection, real-time monitoring system in order to allow the SOS and the governing body to make decisions. So first, let's look at the external factor. Looking at the external factors that affect the system of systems, population growth is one of the factors that we could take into consideration. Like if the population continue to grow, we need to ensure that the transportation can actually support the system. Technology advancement, like new technology, for example, cashless payment, this will also affect how the system of system will react. Economy-wise, SLTS has to really calculate the budget given to them, because when the economy goes down, people may choose to take bus instead of taking the taxi because it's cheaper, and then they have to plan accordingly to this. Business competitiveness will be more about the app, whether it's cheaper fare, and then whether it has a faster response time. Next, we move on to the governing bodies. The governing body is actually the sponsor of SLTS. The government of Singapore is heading this portion. So other than LTA, we have MOT, MOF, and PTC, which is a Public Transport Council. So from here, I would like to highlight that LTA is actually a Holland meaning a part of a wider system that is involved in the development of the nation itself. So holachy is another term where we talk about where the Hollands are actually arranged in a hierarchy system and linked by a system of communication and control. So this is known as holachy being observed in this system itself. So we move on to the constraint that actually affects the governing body, which is like budget. Because of the budget, limited budget, you have to decide how much you need to allocate for each of the different public transportation companies by priority. And the boundaries, we have stated it to be covering the mainland of Singapore instead of the outer island of the Singapore itself. So a land scarcity is also a concern like we have mentioned just now, and also affordability. So public transportation must be made affordable to everybody, and this is one of the criteria that the governing body need to address, and also consider one of the constraints. Environmental is also an issue because while the government needs to reduce global warming by increasing the land traffic itself, that is the only way to build a stronger population. So it is sort of conflicting to the amount of carbon emission versus keeping the economy growing. And legislation will be more on how the rules that we have. So there are rules in Singapore that say that if you want to widen the road itself, you need to eat into individual's house, and there are permits to actually protect the owner's decision. So because of this, the duration to get all the system and paperwork done will also affect how it goes. Okay, next we look at how they collect survey from the system of systems so that the governing body can actually make decision based on that. So LTA Academy has been set up to conduct research studies and also to collect comprehensive data by ways of data analysis, modeling, and simulation. So data mining is also done, and decision maker will base on this to determine what kind of priority they are trying to set. So next we look at the impact assessment of the system of system itself. So the entire system actually failed frequently because of the undue stress to the overall Singapore land transport system, which is the SLTS, and then the absence of governing body in auditing the maintenance system itself. Then there will be a conflict of interest between the governing body and the public transportation companies. So because of this, SOS governance framework will enable the LTA to identify the need for governing bodies at an earlier stage instead of having problem and then resolve it at this time. And also, they will allow them to manage the land transportation system more effectively. So, to the conclusion, we have done a study on the smart cities land transportation management. We have identified the challenges faced by smart cities, and we have used Singapore as a case study to illustrate how to use the government's framework, and also how other smart cities will be able to follow the same. Yep, that's all. Thank you.
Questions?
So Singapore, it's not a closed system. You're connected by road to Malaysia, right?
Yeah, you are connected to
So how does that affect your analysis? I mean, people could buy a car in Malaysia to sort of get away from this high fee, for instance, or commute across the border or something.
So in Singapore and Malaysia, there are different vehicles owned, and different vehicles will start with different alphabet. So for example, Singapore will start with S, and Malaysia will be by their state. So they are able to actually gauge from the causeway which one belongs to us and to them.
But if I understood correctly, you had a very high fee for owning a vehicle in Singapore.
Yes.
So what prevents people from buying a vehicle in Malaysia instead?
They cannot drive. They can drive to Singapore, but with a day kind of permit.
Okay.
Yeah, they cannot drive here permanently.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I like your systemic RAM. I wonder if you also quantify it and test it or whether the relations you have are strong or less strong.
How do I quantify whether it's strong or less strong?
Well, did you do some quantification in the systemic RAM? No, one earlier. Yeah, that one.
So this is what shows that how each is being linked to individual. For example, bus, we look at public transportation companies, they actually operate the buses and also they operate taxis. So this is how we read the systemic RAM, but we did not, as in how do I quantify this?
Yeah, well, the strength of the relation. So if there is a relation between the taxis and the buses for the public transport company, for instance, it costs a certain amount of money to operate, to transport one person per bus, and it costs a different amount of money to do it by taxi, and the space occupation is different, so there could be different strengths of the relations.
Okay.
May I add to it a little bit? Yeah, the point is very well taken. Yeah, this is more space consistent dynamics, basically positive and negative feedbacks. So your point is very well taken. We can assign weights,
Exactly.
and you can actually give more time to nodes and model them as agents, etc. But at this stage, it's system dynamics.
Okay. Okay.
So positive and negative feedback. So we want to know whether there is a correlation and whether it's positive, reinforcing, or balancing. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. Are you planning some implementation of your results to Singapore City or to another city? Do you have some partners maybe from the organizations, from organizations?
At this stage, we have not really go into that, like proposing it to them. However, we are looking at current status of the Land Transport Authority itself and how this will actually improve the management of it. And from here, we are actually illustrating how this framework can be used in any smart cities.
Yeah, because I think it's really important for a lot of cities, not only from Singapore.
Any other questions? Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.